Hello and welcome to the tavern. Tonight we have Sherra Fraser, a survivor of childhood abuse and family violence. She's now on a change agent who helps others through her trauma and support and recovery group slash ministry that reaches over several continents, including us here in the United States. Her mission is to raise awareness of trauma and its impact on society and encourage action to address it. Question remains, can we fix it and will we? As always, we're sponsored by Mad World. Check them out at www.itsworldmadness.com. Check out their app. And if you're looking to get a little bit of tavern merch, we have a tavern slash Mad World crossover hoodie on sale. Go pick that up. If you want to reach out to Shara after the show, we've got her Facebook group ticking across the screen at the bottom for you so you guys can get in touch with her and learn a little bit more. Miss Fraser, how are you today? It's wonderful to have you on the show.
Doing great. Can you hear me?
I can. Landon, how are you, sir?
Hey, doing well. Yeah, we were having mute problems there all around the board.
Yep.
But
My
we're
dog
good
decided
now.
to bark, so I had to mute myself, and I forgot to unmute it. I apologize, everyone.
My cat's with us now too. So.
It's a pet night. So, Landon, how are you tonight, sir?
I thought I said I'm doing well. You know, out here living the dream, my best life from a motel room.
I was about to
Because I'm out
say,
of town working.
typically you don't join us on
Yeah.
the shows like this anymore, so you're out of town working, and you're joining us on a show tonight. It's good to have
That's
you,
it.
buddy.
Well, we try. We try.
So, Miss Fraser, we talked a little bit in the intro there about how you have a trauma support and recovery group slash ministry. Could you tell us a little bit more about how your childhood story influenced your work in creating this group?
I sure can. Well, I was a childhood abuse victim from as well, my earliest memories, ages of 3 years old. I can distinctly remember things as young as three. Memories so vivid that smells I could smell in the room, things I was wearing, very realistic in the moment memories that I have going all the way back to 3 years old. And so this went on in my life until I left home at the age of 17. And you become quite a survivor over that many years of abuse. And you develop some pretty unhealthy coping mechanisms. And unfortunately, when you leave that situation, you take those unhealthy coping mechanisms with you out into the world. So that was what started me, on my journey and in the work that I started in. Now, that was a very long, convoluted road of working with a lot of different types of people over the years, starting with little children, teaching just ballet as a young adult.
I do some ballet with my daughter. I got a 4-year-old girl, so I'm
Oh,
well
you
versed.
love the ballet. And that fact, that was my first job, teaching ballet.
Oh,
Now, I'll tell you, that tied directly to it was because it was the one thing I knew how to do when I left home. I had had ballet classes and I needed to find work and find work quick. And my mind, thank God, went to a healthy thing, healthy ways of doing it.
Not everyone does.
And I knew how to dance. And so first I started going to dance schools to see more. Could I get taught better? Could I learn more? I told them if I could teach for them, I could pay for my classes, by what I made teaching for them. And that impressed them. So I was able to start teaching, dance at 16 years old.
Nice.
So yeah, so that opened just one door after the other, but it all started in that childhood pattern of abuse and with those so-called unhealthy coping strategies that I found to get through life. They got me where I am. They were unhealthy at the time, but they got me to where I am now. And that's how I ended up starting the recovery ministry that I have.
And it's interesting that you mentioned, those unhealthy habits, because I'm a survivor of childhood abuse as well. And, Landon was there for the majority of it. We've been best friends since we were knee high to a grasshopper. So he's seen pretty much all
it's
of it.
about 23 years.
Yeah, at least. And I turned to, in the dawn of video games, we're millennials right there at the cusp of technology taking off. And I turned to that outlet of video games where I could go into a different world and I didn't have to think for a while about what was happening at home. So that was I guess you can call it an unhealthy outlet, but I guess it's better than other things I could
No,
have
it's
turned
the
to.
only way you could preserve your brain. It was a healthy outlet. See, I know that now. I know that now. And see, you feel like maybe just like I did, that the things that I did to escape, for me, it was reading and dancing. And to me, everybody thought that that was unhealthy because either I had my nose buried in a book or I was at a dance class or in a play or something like that.
Mhm.
But I mean, we both knew why we were doing it. Maybe
Exactly.
other people didn't, but we both did. But that is our brain. And this is what I learned from my education later on. Is our brain actually knew how to protect itself, by giving us what we think is unhealthy at the time, which is a withdrawal mechanism into a
Yes.
safe place,
Yes.
which for me was reading and dancing, and for you was video games. So it's actually, Mother Nature, your brain knows what it needs, and it's that self protection. So
And it doesn't, that kind of trauma stuff doesn't stop with childhood. You also have the adult traumas that you go through too, which is stuff that I've been through myself. I've gone through a very dark hole, and I went very negative. I chose sex and alcohol as my outlets, and neither one of them are good for anybody. Very destructive. And once I climbed out and I found the light, and started really doing my shadow work, and soul searching, and all that stuff, I realized what I was doing was wrong, and I came out of that.
now, Landon, did you have childhood trauma of your own? I know you lived through Brandon's with him.
um I mean, I was severely bullied as a kid.
Yeah, we
That is
both
a
were.
trauma.
I
Yeah,
was I, yeah, I was a very fat kid. So I was, bullied for my overweightness and obesity. So I would say that would be the only childhood trauma that I could really think of.
but that is a trauma. And you also have the secondary trauma of living through Brandon's trauma with him too. So you had more than you think. And that's always how it goes. There's always more than you think.
Hmm.
Yeah.
you know
I'm,
but what the reason I asked was the cycle. There's always, you've heard about cycle. It's so true that you can usually find a cycle. Rarely does it just pop up out of nowhere. If you look, you're usually going to find a cycle. And so you just described, indeed, you were living out a cycle that maybe you didn't even identify. You know what I mean? And when you
Right.
definitely, an unidentified cycle becomes dysfunctional. Definitely. I mean, it's struggle enough even to keep an identified cycle from becoming dysfunctional, you know, much
Right.
less unidentified one. And most of us have unidentified cycles. More of us have unidentified cycles than do the identified ones. And one of the questions I think you asked, Brandon, was, is there any help for it? And you know what? That is a tough question when we look at America, especially. Oh my gosh, is there any freaking help for this place? I don't know. I wonder if I didn't start this a year too late. I don't know. I ask the same question because you look at all the stuff that's going around us right now, and has it ever been any worse? And no, no,
no.
it hasn't. Never in history has there been a time this dark. But I will say that the one thing I learned when I did start educating myself on this and going to school to learn about it was that identifying the patterns and identifying the problem. You always hear the cliche that that's the first step to healing, but no, it really is,
Yeah.
because that's how your brain synopsis works. Because when you identify the problem, your brain has done the first step to making a new synopsis. And when
Yes.
it does that, just each time closer, little bit closer, a little bit closer. So each time we identify a little bit more, a little bit closer we are, to that healing
Yeah,
we
I like to
chase.
think of the
So
I like to think of the brain as a computer.
yeah,
When it identifies the error, the computer immediately tries to fix the
perfect.
errors.
Yes, yes, exactly.
So let me do maybe a counter argument and see what your thought is here. So for me, for example, because I had such bad, childhood, specifically associated to my stepfather and, abandonment of my actual father, I was terrified to become a father myself. And I put off having children for a long time because even though I didn't exhibit the same symptoms, like I'm not a drinker, I don't like to drink, I don't have those same tendencies, but I was always scared that what if I do? What if after I have a kid, that cycle rears its ugly head and I become what my stepfather or my biological father was? And since I identified that problem at a very young age and told myself I'm just not going to be like them, and that was my entire goal, was that I'm not going to be them, and if I do have a kid, I'm not going to be that kind of father because I've learned
Right.
what I shouldn't do.
Learn from the sins of the father. Yeah.
Exactly. What would you say goes with that as far as to fix it? Because it's not that I had an unidentified problem. I identified extremely early.
No, you're doing exactly what you can, and that is basically you're doing the exact right thing. You have identified the problem, and identifying the problem is the first step to the brain healing itself. You've identified, first of all, you knew where your dysfunction came from, so that was the first step. And then you knew what you definitely would not do the same is the next step. And see, so each step that you take, above and beyond that, each step of the way, you are healing not only, I mean, you'll go beyond healing yourself into healing the next generation. And that's when you are starting to break the cycle. Because as you're healing yourself, you're also healing his generation for him by, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I'll tell you right now, I'm watching this play out with my own kids. And it's funny you bring this up because I'm talking to some of my people in my group, and there's just 4 or 5 of us that have shared really intricate details of how bad things have gotten. And just today, one of them said to me, "Well, this example that you're talking about, it's so dysfunctional. I don't know that I know anybody like that." And I was like, "Yes, you do." No, I don't. I'm like, "Yes, you do." No, I don't. I'm like, "Oh, yes, you do. You know me. You do know somebody that dysfunctional because you know me." And she was like, "Oh, I'm that mentally ill." And I said, "Yes, but you know me."
Right?
Because and identifying is not just that my mother and father were mentally ill. Obviously, they were. They wouldn't have done the things that they did.
Yeah.
But also, I also live out the mental illness that is inevitable. That's just from living through that and those unhealthy coping mechanisms and they are unhealthy and they do lead to bad things later in life.
Yeah.
So we have that to deal with. So, once you're seeing all that, not only in your past generation, but in your current generation, you're literally identifying 2 generations right there. So how can you not be healing the next one going forward? Do you see what I'm saying?
Very true.
So that literally, and that's why your brain literally is forming new pathways.
I know for me, I'm actively trying to form those new pathways because most of my life, my reaction to problems, because obviously going through what we've been through, I have anxiety and depression, obviously, on top of the fact that, I'm neurodivergent, have ADHD, so my negative coping mechanism was to shut down and bring an ice storm when something went wrong. I would just be cold. You'd get the cold shoulder. I wouldn't talk to you. That's it. I'd just withdraw from the problem. And that was all you got from me. If I was mad, you knew I was mad because I wouldn't speak.
How are you doing with it now?
Much better. My thought process has now changed to, and I don't know if you see right now when I'm speaking how I think before I speak. I don't want certain things to come out of my mouth if I haven't thought it through first. So I've tried to identify that and say, no, I don't need to withdraw. And if I do withdraw, I need to withdraw for a time period. So for me, sometimes that's I'm going to go and lay down and I'm going to take a nap. And when I wake up, I'm going to be cooled off. And for me, that helps. And then we'll get back to this conversation because we still need to discuss it. It still needs to be dealt with. And I don't need to just run from the problem.
And that is super healthy too.
Yeah.
Good
We
job
talk
for being
about it
able to
now
do it.
and get the uncomfortable conversation out of the way now. It's not going to fester and become a giant explosion later. And I think that's where a lot of people mess up is they don't want to talk about their feelings and then they hold on to it and it becomes something bigger and bigger and bigger. And then you really blow up because you've had that same argument in your head 30 times and the other person thought the argument was over. So now you
Yes,
are
that's
30
right.
arguments deep and they don't know it.
See, you're doing the work. You're doing so much work already. And this is how you are healing yourself. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes.
You're doing the work. And when I'm saying I'm living this out in my own family, you know, I knew how dysfunctional my parents were. But my kids saw me as equally dysfunctional. You know what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
for totally different reasons. For totally different reasons. And I will never forget when they had to start doing chores in middle school, which I still laugh at today, you know,
My
because
daughter's 4.
that was abuse, you know, that
Her
was their
only
abuse.
chore
And you know,
is
my mistake was
Yeah.
I never told them about my childhood. I thought that sparing them of that was my dysfunctional thought. They know I thought them loving their grandmother would be better, not knowing that she was mentally ill. So see, my dysfunction and my dysfunctional way of coping with my mentally ill mother was to keep it in the closet, you know, which didn't do my kids any favors.
Nope.
So because they didn't see what I lived through, they had no way to gauge the current crazy by. You know what I'm saying? So
Sure.
all they're seeing is been, and of course, you know, my mother's got generations on me with homespun crazy. So, and she was already thinking, you know, she knew the manipulation game. She knew manipulating kids. It was her game. Well, one thing like you that I had said was, I will never manipulate my kids. And so, because I was going to never manipulate my kids, it never occurred to me that she was still manipulating my kids, you know? So, those kind of things. So, my kids still lived through trauma because I didn't tell them. She did manipulate them, and they were adults when it all came down. Do you know what I'm saying? And then in the retrospect, see, even though they would have deemed their their parenting as being me and my husband to have been harsh, and we were strict, but we weren't harsh. But now as adults, they can look back with all this information and process it. But as children, I didn't tell them. So they only had, you know, my limited information that I had given them. So as yourself going forward, you'll have that to gauge it by. You know, you should tell a certain amount, you know, obviously to your kids that are appropriate as you go.
Yes.
Don't be my mistake. Don't live out my mistake and wait until they're grown. You know what I mean? And then it's just like, then you're right, kaboom, the big explosion that occurs. And so now we are kind of fixing that after the fact because I didn't tell them, and we did have the big kaboom with my mother's mental illness. So, and it was too late. Obviously, they should have known sooner. So here I am. Here I am.
Brandon, can you check chat? Also, Miss Sherra, can you discuss the importance of self-care for individuals who have experienced childhood trauma?
Yes, it is so important. First of all, telling someone is the most important thing, obviously. If someone is going through some sort of childhood abuse or trauma of any sort, being able to talk to somebody, first of all, about it is most important. Secondly, they need to be able to get help immediately because one of the things that's going on in our society is that when we're going through this as children, what Brandon went through, what I went through as children, what you went through, being bullied and not having not having anyone help you. This is what causes the traumas that are acted out on in society right now. This is what has caused us to become so broken so severely. It's because we just refused to acknowledge it for so long. We just skipped on our merry way and acted like nothing was going on,
You
when in
know,
fact it
we
was.
had a previous guest that offered me a bit of wisdom that I take to this day, because you're right. There are so many people in this world that are dealing with traumas that they haven't addressed or just refuse to go back and deal with. They said, when you're dealing with someone who is being, any type of way, irate, angry, sad, when they're showing those emotions that don't make sense to you, view them from the perspective of you're having that argument with a child.
Mhm.
Because in that moment, that's their inner child acting out. And that's the only way they learn how to deal with it. So if you can view it from that perspective, you can be a lot more gentle with the way you respond to them and try to handle it the way you would if your child was making a temper tantrum and throwing a fit, because they don't know how to handle it any better. And that stuck with me.
That's right. That's a good analogy. And a lot of times however they're acting in that argument, whatever age you would assign to them, will many times be around the age they were that injury occurred. You know,
Yeah,
just oddly enough, how it turns out to be. Not, I'm not claiming to be a social scientist and
no,
all
but
that fact or anything like that.
there's
I'm
a
just saying
correlation.
it has been a creepy correlation in my experience. Yeah.
And that
So
was
I
something. Oh, go ahead, Len.
okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was
We're
just going
fine.
to ask, I wonder what effects childhood traumas have on friends. Like for Landon, for example, who was there during a lot of the outbursts and things that happened. I mean, for example, one night, my stepfather decided to go berserk, and we had to block my bedroom door with a couch and bust a window out to get out our bedroom so that my mother could pick us up to get us out of that situation. And he was there through all that. So no, he wasn't the one actively in danger, but he sure was living that moment.
I mean, I'm pretty sure I was actively in
Yeah, you know
danger.
what I mean.
But
So, Landon,
I'll be laughing at that.
how did all that affect you?
I mean, honestly, I think what affected me more than anything, like the event didn't matter. It was how the effects it had on Brandon is where it really got to me. Because I'm a big empathic person, and I can see that he's suffering through this stuff. And so, in a sense, I want to throw myself on the grenade, to try and save him from that. And really, that's been my entire life, is trying to save everybody from the hurt and trying to take it on upon myself to have it.
And it's funny you say that, because one of the girls or ladies that lived through most of my abuse with me from as young as 6 years old, recently, just in the last year, has found me again. And do you know that she said the same thing to me? All of this time, I had always thought that I kind of protected her, and I did in a lot of ways, because I taught her a lot of coping, unhealthy coping ways. But with that being said, she told me that the reason that she stuck so close to me was that she knew about the abuse. And see, no one had ever told me that they knew. You know what I mean? So she had finally come back after all those years to let me know that the reason that it was, yes, she did know about it, but she had intentionally, repeatedly subjected herself to the same situations I was in, because she didn't want to leave my side, because she didn't want to leave my side. And because she said, not so much because she was afraid of what would happen if I weren't there, but if she weren't there, but because she was afraid of what she would come back to if she left.
Yeah, like
You
an
know,
emotional support person.
yeah, yeah, sort of, yes, exactly.
Uh,
And so I felt so bad. In fact, she just told me this last week. It's ironic we're having this
that's really
conversation.
crazy.
Yeah, and it made me feel really bad after I thought about it, but I don't know why, you know what I mean? I can't She couldn't change anything for me, and I couldn't change anything for her. You know what I mean? We just
Well, if
moved
I had
through
to
it
say
together.
anything, it would be that, you felt bad that she subjected herself to the situation in order to protect you from that.
Yeah,
But there again, I mean, she feels bad that you had to go through that, and she didn't want you to go through that alone. And I think that's something that me and Brandon have such a strong, why we have such a strong bond,
Yeah.
is because we don't let each other get subjected to the stuff that we were subjected to when we were children.
Yep.
that's
Like
great.
we are, attack dogs
Yeah.
for each other.
That's right.
And we traded blood when we were 10 and said we'd never leave each other behind.
Yep.
And it's stuck for over 23 years now.
That's funny.
You
She and
know,
I did that same thing when we were 6.
That's what I'm talking about.
it just took us a little longer to figure it out.
That's pretty cool, though.
It's starting to rear up into the 25-minute mark. We're definitely going to have to bring you back on. We really didn't get to ask half the questions that we wanted to, and I really feel this is an important conversation that we are having.
I agree.
And I think that our audience and more of the world actually needs to listen to this.
I agree.
So the more we can get it out there, the better. So for the final question, say this, just about every podcast, and it's been used against me 3 different times. You sorry POSs, you know who you are. I would use the middle finger, but that would be weird and wrong. Um, what is one question that you wish we would have asked you, and how would you have answered that question?
Oh, jeez.
That's what I said 3 different times.
That's bad.
That's what I said.
That's
too.
just like, do my job for me because I didn't do my job.
Oh gosh, no, no. Oh,
Called out, Landon.
oh.
Called out.
Well, see, let me give you a little history on the call out. That is that.
Bye, Landon.
I gotta give you a little bit of history on the call out. I'm both a mom and a teacher. So I know all about the call out guilt. So I had to maximize that one. But with all that being said, then if you resorted to me having to come up with the answer to that, then I would have to remember everything, all the questions. And we were just having a discussion, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I kind of don't remember the questions even so much.
Well, how about I ask you a question?
Okay.
Would that be okay? You said that you turned your traumatic past into a path of freedom and used it to help others. And how would you say you've done that?
Well, that is in starting this site, Dead Folks Talking. And when I actually started this site, I thought it was just going to be a continuation of the social work I've been doing with the court. Mm-hmm. But it didn't. It just turned into this, like, people from all over the world. Literally from every continent, all over the world. Some of these freaking war-torn nations are involved in this. And they're just there, and they just kind of congregate there and hang out there. And you see a lot of different fringe stuff that you'd expect to see. Mm-hmm. But then you do also see just a glimpse of hope. You know what I mean? Just that so many different types of people from so many different corners of the world are able to come there and to share together and not attack each other because they don't agree. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
So that was,
for sure.
It's turned into that. And as it's turned into that, it's opening a platform to speak to things like human trafficking. And things like other atrocities of trauma, that what's going on in the Ukraine. You know what I'm saying? Because truth is, the worst trauma all really starts at the world level. If you look at the research behind it, it all starts by people being affected by war and then taking it home. It actually changes your DNA. I don't know if you know.
Yeah, no.
Yep. So there you go. So think about the world wars. and track how much worse it's gotten after World War I, II, and Vietnam. And what have we had? A 22 freaking war on terror. And
Right.
you see what I'm saying? It changes their DNA. And then they pass that DNA to their children, and there is a cycle right there,
Yep.
a genetic cycle being created. And those kids sure don't know what's coming,
I
but
mean,
that
just as
cycle's
an
already being
example,
created.
my
Hmm.
father lived through, or my grandfather lived through Vietnam, sprayed with Agent Orange.
Yeah, my dad was a Vietnam vet.
Then you know exactly what I'm talking
Yep,
about.
I
My
do.
father in the Navy.
My dad was in the Navy too. Yep.
Mine too.
Really? So,
Yeah.
that's a whole different story there.
Yeah.
Kids of veterans do
Yep.
have their own set of trauma, honestly, but that's another topic.
True.
And
Well,
in the United States, that's not talked about.
Miss Fraser, it has been phenomenal. As Landon said, we definitely have to have you back because I think not only does the world need to hear more of what you bring to the table, but I think honestly it's good for the three of us to have a conversation like this. We've all been through some stuff, and just to have common ground and a place to be open and together, I think is really good for all three of us. So this is a conversation I would love to continue. Um,
For sure.
I really can't thank you enough for being on. We had so many more questions that we wanted to ask. We just got so caught up in the good conversation, we just went right for it. Do you have any final words for our audience?
Nope. I look forward to coming back. Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed the time and the
Absolutely.
conversation.
Landino, do you have any closing words for our audience, sir?
Yes. First, I'm going to start with you, Miss Shara. Like Brandon said, I'll reiterate that we loved having you on. We have so much in common. It's unreal. Definitely going to have you back. We don't know when yet, but it's going to happen. To our audience, thank you guys for listening, being a part of our tavern family. We would love you to like, follow, and share. We are on every major social media platform, definitely on Facebook. Facebook. uh, you know, um, just keep on keeping on, guys. Like Brandon said, Michelle said, like I said, a lot of people suffer from these childhood traumas, and it's not easy to come out of sometimes, but there is hope. As we all three have found, we have all three gone through the exact same stuff, and only two of us knew each other until today. So, it's possible. There's a place for everybody.
Absolutely. And that place might just be here at the tavern for you. That's the
Yeah.
whole
That's
reason
it.
we started this, was to give everybody a safe haven, a safe place to come and feel accepted and to have these conversations and maybe learn a little something along the way.
That's
So,
it.
everyone out there in our tavern family, we love you. We mean that. Love you, mean it. I say it every episode, and I mean it. So keep coming on back. Join us live. Ask those questions. Let's get to know you. You're not just a number for us. We truly want to have that conversation with you. Come join us live. Ask questions with our guests, and be a regular with us. Mike, this is a little shout out to you. You know who you are. But as always, guys, thanks for stopping by.